Welcome to chapter 17 of First Chronicles. My name is Frank, and this is Reflections by Wakeji Kamori. Oh, I've been working on that introduction. I got it right in chapter 17. But yeah, here we are in chapter 17. We have 12 chapters to go after we finish this one. I hope you're tracking. I hope you're enjoying the book. Two things I want us to pick from chapter 17. And I'm going to read for us verse 1 of chapter 17 and verse 7 of chapter 17. So welcome. I hope your heart is ready to receive from God and from the word of God. Verse 1. After David was settled in his palace, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am, living in a house of cedar, while the ark of the covenant of the Lord is under a tent." You know, the thing I liked about that verse is that David has an unstoppable heart for God. Yeah, because we all know this phrase where I think it's in Acts where, God says that David was a man after my own heart. Imagine, we saw in the earlier chapters that immediately David was made king, the first thing he did was to go and get the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God's presence, the Ark of the Covenant, and bring it back home. And on the way home, we saw what happened. Uzzah, who's one of the guys who were, leading the cart that was carrying the presents, died, was struck dead. And David paused, and the journey had to stop for some days. But again, we see later David comes and he says, let's go and do it right this time. And he brings it to the city of David. The ark is in a place where David has prepared. But then David gets to a place where a palace has been built for him. And he gets to a place where he's like, no. My heart is still not settled. And he comes and asks this question: how is it that I'm living in a house of cedar, like this palace, this well-built place, while the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord is under a tent? Yeah, this is really cool, man. Like, David is inspiring you and I to constantly think about the presence of God in our lives. He's inspiring you and I to constantly think, are we prioritizing everything else and leaving the presence of God unprioritized, our walk with God unprioritized, our relationship with God unprioritized? And we really just have to see the trend that David has. That he's king, and the first thing he does, put the presence of God where it's meant to be. Bring the ark of God here. Right? And then now when he's settled in his palace, he goes back and he says, no. There's no way I'm living in this kind of a house while the ark of God is in a tent. I want to build a temple for God. Yeah. And I really want us to pick this, that David had a heart for God. David consistently was checking, where am I? Where is God? Where am I in relation to where the presence of God is? There's no way I can be living in a palace and God's presence is in a tent. This is the heart that David had. He had a burden for God. I really pray that this inspires us, right? Let's switch to verse 7. It's a totally different takeout. So that's takeout number 1. Verse 7 is totally different. In verse 7 it says, now then tell my servant David. Now this is God speaking. This is what the Lord Almighty says. God is speaking about David. He says, I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name like the names of the greatest men on earth, and I will provide a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Right? God is reminding David where he took him from. He's telling him, I took you from the pasture lands, and I've placed you in this palace. I've been with you through it all. I really like this because I saw, like, this verse just made me hear, and it made me see, and it made my heart settle to know that I'm not lost to God. David was there taking care of a few sheep, You remember, if you remember well, the story of David when he took lunch to his brothers, and his brothers were in the army, and Goliath was taunting the armies of Israel, and his brother asked him, "Who did you leave those few sheep that you normally take care of with?" Like his sheep were even few. But in those hidden pasture lands, in that hidden land, in that forgotten place, God never, ever forgot about David. God took him from those pasture lands and placed him in the palace. If anybody had gone to David while he was in those lands and told him, "One day you're going to be king," the guy would have told you, "My guy, those stories, you know how Kenyans say stories are jabba?" It's exactly what he'd have told them. Because there is no way you'd have laid a path, any possible path for David to become king. It took the hand of God. It took the providence of God. You and I are not lost to God. You might be in a season of your life where what it feels like is that you're in some hidden pasture lands taking care of a few sheep. But listen to me. God sees you there. Be faithful there, taking care of those sheep. The Bible tells us how David used to fight bears and fight lions just to guard the sheep. Be faithful there. Take care of the few sheep that God has allowed you. Your few sheep might be your small business today. Your few sheep might be the job that you're doing today that doesn't seem anything like what God has promised you. Listen to me. God sees you there. God will lift you. God will sustain you. God will bring you to the place that He has promised to bring you. You're not lost to Him. And I see this exchange between God and David. Right? David is so passionate about God. Maybe the reason why David is so passionate about the presence of God is because he's realized it has taken God for me to reach here. Saul even wanted to kill me. I've run all my life. And by the time he gets the chance to be king, he's like, bring the presence of God here. I want God here. I want God first in everything that I'm doing. I will inquire of God. Why? Because I have seen where God has taken me from. It has taken the hand of God to bring me from the pasture lands to the palace. So I'm not going to sit in this palace and think that I can sustain being in this palace on my own. Maybe that's what makes him have this burden, this passion for God, because he knows where God has taken him from, and he knows what it has taken for him to get to the place that he has gotten to. My challenge to us today is to ask, do you have a burden for God like David did? Do you have a priority for the presence of God like David did? Do you have the conviction of God? Just to be like, there's no way I'm going to live in a palace and God is in a tent. Do you have that kind of a conviction? Like David did? And then secondly, can you see the hand of God in your life? Can you trust the hand of God in your life to let Him take you from the pasture lands and lead you to the palace? Because only God can do that for you. God lifts, God sustains. God is faithful to keep you in the places that He places you. So may we remember, it takes God's favor, it will take God's providence for us to be able to do and to stay in the places that God lifts us to. Have a great day. Bye.